And your last book actually covered this when you talked about, I think you talked about the Dalai Lama having compassion. Mm-hmm. And this came up earlier, and you really answered the question with, prajna.
I talked about the Dalai Lama having compassion?
I thought in your last book you did. You talked about compassion at one point.
Oh, compassion, yeah.
Compassion, yeah.
Yes.
And this came up earlier with, being a baby Buddha and learning how to communicate and egoing and all that stuff, which solves a dilemma I've had for the last couple of years. But this dilemma really is around compassion, and it feels like being compassionate in some way is being judgmental. And what I mean by that is it's easy for me to be compassionate with someone who's, let's say, homeless, versus if someone seems like it's hard for me to have compassion for you per se. You don't seem to need it.
Yeah.
So there's this.
I appreciate your honesty. I can still that's still present for you. Yes. Yes.
So every time I try to practice compassion, ego seems to jump in there with judgment and things like that.
Right. The compassion in the way I use it in a different way than I think a lot of people are used to hearing it. To me, compassion is not something the ego does. Don't get me wrong. If I'm going to be around egos, I'd rather be around egos that are trying to be compassionate than egos that are not trying to be compassionate. They're like better dream characters to be around. But an ego trying to be compassionate isn't true compassion. It's a surrogate, and it's a nice surrogate. It's a stand-in. It kind of modulates ego's behavior, but it's not true compassion. Right? True compassion isn't something that I feel for another. True compassion is when I know in every fiber in my being that you are me. You are me. I'm talking to me, not you. You are me. There's only one here. You see what I mean? And sometimes you meet yourself as a homeless person. Sometimes you meet yourself as an irrational, angry person. Sometimes you meet yourself as a compassionate Buddha. The next thing you meet yourself as somebody who's being sort of hypercritical, but really seen beyond the veil of separation, and you don't make otherness about the world, because you realize this is life meeting life. This is spirit meeting spirit. It's not me meeting you. It's this meeting itself. And that experience, that perception, that breeds compassion. Because in that compassion, we don't separate ourselves from each other. In our hearts, you see? It doesn't mean if someone's doing something really nasty that you don't go, no, you can't do that. But it means even if you have to say, no, you can't do that, in your heart, you haven't separated from them at all. And there's a natural, spontaneous flow of love, of compassion that comes out of that. Right? That's the heart in the heart wisdom. You see? So it may begin as very subtle, just a very subtle sense of a connection, of a sameness. We are not actually different in essence. When we are together and we are not forgetting that, our actions naturally reflect that. We don't have to try to be compassionate or loving. It's just what happens. Does that make sense? And even if you don't have sort of a really deep realization of this, you can try. I suggest to people all the time to try this very simple thing. When you go up to somebody, anybody, almost like you just feel a sort of energetic, if you're sensitive, you can feel there's an energetic connection, right? You just look at somebody, boom, it's there. You look at somebody, it's there. There it is. There it is. It's this subtle, intuitive, energetic connection. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Often in ego land, people only feel it when they feel extraordinarily close, in those rare moments when they get really close, you know what I mean? 2 a.m. pillow talk, where the ego layer boundaries come down, and there's this connection, right? It's an energetic connection that's quite independent from what you're talking about, you know? In the morning, you'll come back up. What did I say last night at 2 o'clock in the morning? Let's get rid of that connection thing. It's really intimate and scary. But see, but even in the land of ego, occasionally there's this connection. And if you just, the next time you're in the room or communicating with somebody, just walk in, get that subtle sense of a connection. And then you pay attention, and you can literally tell, you're just talking, let's say, da 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 da. And you can spot the exact word that you speak that severs the connection. If you speak anything that's untrue, anything that separates you, anything separates you. You literally feel it's like that line of connection, a scissors just come and go click. And you feel that. Now, most people don't feel it because they're not paying attention. But unconsciously, they feel when the connection gets severed. And unfortunately, when they feel the connection gets severed, it causes the ego to even go into more reaction. And so the severing gets more complete. And because they feel that, and unconsciously it's uncomfortable to not feel your connection with others, then you have more reaction. It's this vicious circle, right? But if you sense the connection first before you say anything, you'll really start to get the hang of how to be, even in challenging situations with very challenging people, how to be with them in such a way that you don't sever it. Right? And I can't tell you how to do it, but you kind of get the hang of it by playing with it a bit. Yeah? Do you get the feel of what I'm talking about?
Yes. Sometimes, though, I notice if people are too close to you, that makes it, I mean, there's almost like this, you talked about transmitting earlier today. Mm-hmm. So sometimes you almost, if somebody's really in your face and they're egoing with you, yeah, and then you don't want to participate in that, but you're kind of boxed in.
Yeah.
There's just, it's almost like you want to sever the connection at that point.
I know, but that's only ego.
If you don't sever it, it just, I mean, where do you go? You just kind of take it?
No.
Or just abide in it?
You can say no without severing it. Look, parents do it all the time to their children. A good parent. A bad parent severs their emotional connection in that moment with their child when they have to say no. They get very upset. They sever that connection. The child feels it immediately. The child starts crying, and therefore the connection gets severed. And but in general, I think parents in general have the experience of sometimes having to say things to their children. No, you can't do that. You can't do that, without severing the connection, the bond of love. So what I'm speaking about may sound mysterious or complicated, but it's actually not. A good parent does it all the time. They're not always in the position of having to say yes to their children. Yes, Johnny, you can empty the cereal shelves at the supermarket under the floor. That's fine. I don't want to disconnect from you, so just go ahead and do it. You know, that's you'll end up with a monster, right? But no, Johnny, no, you can't do that. And then Johnny, flops himself onto the floor and throws an absolute fit, right? And the mother's, oh God, what do I do now? But if it's a good parent, there's still a very deep emotional and even deeper existential connection. That's what I'm talking about. It has nothing to do with being a doormat for anybody. In fact, this is quite a contradiction in most people's minds, but as we discover our true unity and oneness with life, with God, with each other, as we realize our true non-separateness, in a paradoxical way, we also discover our true human autonomy. And that seems paradoxical, but that's the way it is. We discover a sense of a human autonomy, a solidity, without separation. You feel what I'm talking about? Like Jesus is a great example. Someone who sees God in everyone and everything, but he has his own autonomy, doesn't he? He's got his thing to do, and he's going to do it, and he's going to carry it out. And if his life is threatened, he's going to do it anyway. And if people disagree with him, he has a mission to accomplish, and he's going to do it. He's a very autonomous being, but he's not separate. Egos think as autonomy as separateness, but it's in our spiritual realization, we come to this deep sense of autonomy. That's why I say it doesn't mean you're a doormat. It doesn't mean you lose yourself to the agenda of everybody around you. It's just, in many ways, it's just the opposite. Life or the divine gets to live itself through you in the way it chooses. And then you're not a carbon copy of anything or anybody. But play with that thing of what's it like not to energetically disconnect to somebody even if they're difficult. And how do you dance with them, you see?
It's easy on the subway.
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
Thank you very much. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.